So, you're a founder. You've got this amazing idea, right? But then comes the big question. What technology should you actually use to build it? You've got to move fast, but you also can't build something that's going to crumble. Let's break down how you do it the right way.
This is the big one, isn't it? The classic dilemma. It feels like this impossible balancing act. But don't worry, in this explainer, we're going to figure out exactly how to walk that tightrope. Okay, so before we even touch a single line of code, before we talk about any frameworks or databases, we need to lay down some ground rules. Think of this as getting your philosophy straight before you start building. Listen, if you only remember one thing from this whole guide, make it this. It is not about the tech. It is all about focus. What is the single most painful problem you are trying to solve? Your job is to build the absolute smallest, simplest thing that solves that one problem. Everything else, it's just noise. All right, building on that idea of focus, here are 5 core principles to keep you on the straight and narrow. First, please stick to well-supported tools with huge communities. They're your safety net. Next, buy what isn't your secret sauce. Seriously, problems like payments and user logins have been solved a million times. Design for change, because I promise you, your product is going to change. And this is huge. Measure everything from day one and make security a priority, not some afterthought you tack on later. Okay, principles are locked in. Now for the fun part. Let's get tactical and actually start picking our tools. We're going to break it down into the 3 big layers: your front end, your back end, and your database. You know, a great way to think about your tech stack is that it's just a set of building blocks, like Legos. The goal isn't to find one magic tool that does everything. It's about picking the right combination of blocks for the specific thing you're trying to build. So for your front end, that's the part your users actually see and click on, you've got some fantastic options. For most web apps, Next.js is kind of the default choice, and for good reason. The ecosystem is massive, but if you're someone who just loves clean code and wicked fast performance, you really should check out SvelteKit. And if you're building something that's mostly content, like a blog or documentation, Astro is an absolute specialist. All right, let's move down to the back end. You basically have 2 main paths here. Path 1 is what I call the instant back end, using something like Supabase. It's a massive shortcut. It gives you a database, authentication, and storage all bundled into one. Path 2 is for the TypeScript fans out there, building a custom API with Next.js and a tool called TRPC. The developer experience is just chef's kiss. It makes connecting your front end and back end feel seamless. So what about the database itself? You know, the brains of the whole operation. Well, for most MVPs, the answer is refreshingly simple. Use a managed Postgres database with a tool called Prisma. Postgres is the industry standard. It's rock solid. And Prisma sits on top, acting like a brilliant translator that makes it super safe and easy for your app to talk to the database without you having to write a ton of complex code. Hey, remember that rule about buying what isn't your secret sauce? Well, this is exactly what that looks like in the real world. Your magic isn't in building yet another login form. Use a service like Clerk for that. It isn't in processing credit cards. Use Stripe. It's not in sending emails. Use Resend. Your one and only job is to focus your precious time on what makes your product unique. Okay, so we've looked at the individual Lego bricks. Now let's see what happens when we click them all together. We're going to look at some complete, battle-tested stacks for different kinds of products. First up, the classic B2B SaaS dashboard. You can see the stack is all about speed and a great developer experience. We've got Next.js for the front end, Clerk handling all those authentication headaches, and that killer combo of TRPC and Prisma on the back end. You host it all on Vercel, and boom, you've got a recipe for shipping a really polished professional web app super fast. But what if you're building a mobile app? Well, the game totally changes. Here we're using React Native with Expo, which lets you build for both iOS and Android from one codebase. And notice the star of the show here is Supabase. It's doing everything. It's your database, your user authentication, and your file storage. For a small team, having all of that in one place is a massive, massive time saver. And finally, let's look at a regulated space, like healthcare, where your tech choices have to be way more deliberate. You're not going to use a simple auth provider. You're going to upgrade to something enterprise grade, like Auth0 for strict access control. Your storage has to be explicitly encrypted to protect sensitive data. And you're building an audit logging from day one, so you have a clear record of every single action taken. In this world, security and compliance aren't features, they're the entire foundation. Look, knowing the right tools to use is great, but it's only half the battle. You also have to know what not to do. So now let's talk about the most common traps that founders fall into and, more importantly, how you can avoid them. Pitfall number one, the silent killer of so many amazing projects, feature creep. It's that constant nagging voice in your head that says, hey, let's just add one more thing, and then another, and then another. So how do you fight it? The solution is actually pretty simple, but it takes discipline. You need to define the one single metric your MVP is supposed to move. Then, for every new feature idea that comes up, you just ask one question. Does this directly help move that metric? If the answer is no, you cut it. End of story. Trap number two is the do-it-yourself-everything mindset. This is where you feel super productive because you spent a whole week building your own billing system, but that's a week you didn't spend building your actual product. You're confusing activity with progress. The fix here is to be absolutely ruthless about outsourcing. Ask yourself, is this part of my company's unique core secret sauce? If it's not, hand it off. Use your limited brain power on the stuff that actually makes your product special. And the last big trap is over-engineering. I'm talking about setting up these super complex systems like Kubernetes when you have literally 0 users. It's such a classic tempting mistake. The fix is just so much simpler. Start with what's called a platform as a service, or PaaS. These are amazing services like Vercel, Render, or Railway that handle all the complicated infrastructure for you. You can earn the right to have a complex setup later once you actually have the revenue and the traffic to justify it. Okay, to wrap all of this up, let's finish with something super tangible and actionable. A checklist. These are the 10 things you should have ticked off before you let a single user in the door. Let's run through this pre-flight check really quick. Got your code in a repository with automated deployment? Check. Are the core pieces wired up, like your auth provider, your database, and a live API? Got your critical business tools ready, like payments in test mode and basic analytics? And finally, is the whole process automated? If you can confidently check off these boxes, my friend, you are ready to launch. So there you have it, the principles, the building blocks, the traps to avoid, and the final checklist. The tools are ready, the roadmap is clear. The only question left is the one you see right here. What problem are you going to solve first?